On today's episode of RC Kicks, we're talking about everything to do with LiPo batteries in vintage cars. Yes, the batteries that apparently burn your house down and scare everybody. So on this episode, we're going to be talking about how you store them, how you look after them, how you charge them. Today's episode is sponsored by TomTop. TomTop does all types of RC stuff, so you can go check them out at the link below, and a massive thanks to them for supporting today's video. Hi, and welcome to RC Kicks. On today's show, we're talking about LiPo batteries in vintage RC cars. Now, there's a lot to cover in this, and I'm by no means an expert in this field. I'm just going to go over the way that I manage them, look after them, store them, and try and give you a bit more information in regard to whether you would like to use these in your vintage cars. Now, I am a big fan personally, but there is some things you have to do with these kind of batteries. Now, we all remember back in the day we had these batteries, which is the NiCad batteries. That's a classic one from Tamiya. 1400 is the actual storage capacity of it, and these were pretty simple back in the day. You just charged them up, ran them, put them away, and that was it, and no one really paid much attention to them. Yes, there were slightly bigger versions that came out, and there was obviously different voltage ones, but apart from that, that's kind of where we're at. Obviously, if you were into racing, then you would balance all your cells and all that kind of stuff, but that wasn't me back in the day. I was driving a Grasshopper and a Falcon, so I never got hardcore into it like that, and I think a lot of people just had one or two batteries, put them in the car and just drove them. So coming back into the hobby, you have these new technologies that seem to have turned up that kind of don't really understand, you don't really know because they weren't around back in the day. Brushless motors, for example, and LiPo batteries. So I'm just going to talk about my experience with LiPos and how I deal with them personally, and why I even have LiPos, and I have quite a few of them. LiPo batteries, you have to treat them with care. Now, I personally only use LiPo batteries in hard cases. I'm not a fan of the soft ones, even though thousands of people run soft ones. It's just another level of safety, especially if you're running in vintage cars, like things like the Novafox, well, the Fox, if you will, or the Frog. The battery is exposed to the elements and has no real protection, so a stone could hit it and things like that if you're going over rough terrain. So I personally myself run hard cases, so I can kind of recommend that. Now, as you can see from a traditional battery that you're used to, there's two cables. But why is there two cables? Well, the cable on the left does exactly the same as the one on the right. Now, this little cable here is basically how the chargers or any readers tell you what's going on with the cells inside. And it tells you what the voltage is. So chargers, for instance, like this one, have a balance connector, so it knows and can talk to each cell individually. That makes them a little bit cleverer than the old versions. What else can I tell you about this battery? Now, I am a big fan of these, and the reason I am a big fan of these mainly is what people don't really talk about when you're driving old vintage cars, especially if you're driving with brushed motors, is the weight difference. Now, a lot of the old vintage cars, you don't really want to throw brushless motors into them because they're just too much power for the chassis and the gearboxes, and they weren't really designed for that kind of power. So me personally, I run a lot of brushed motors, but I still run them on LiPo. Why? Mainly because they're much lighter. That really helps these older cars because they're used to, and they were designed to run with batteries like this, which were much heavier. To show you just how heavy they are, I'm going to weigh this for you now. Now, this battery comes in at 435 grams. The LiPo version, 228 grams. So it's half the weight. So that's a hell of a saving when you're running in a car like this. So I'm a big fan of that. And I find that in the vintage cars, it makes a big difference to them. It puts less strain on the suspension. You get faster acceleration, better turning, and the cars aren't carrying as much weight, so there's less stress on the cars as well. So that's my number one thing that I really do like about the LiPo batteries. that it makes it easier for the car to run. The second one is obviously it produces a better power. The power curve of a LiPo battery is much flat and then just drops off at the end, whereas the old batteries used to just slowly get slower and slower and slower and slower and slower. So you get a much better battery response, and it can deliver power much more of a punch. Now, LiPo batteries come in lots of different shapes and sizes. Now, I've got a few here as a range that we'll just go through quickly. So these are saddle packs, or 1S each. Basically, you run them in pairs to give you 2S. Now, the idea with these, just like it was back in the day, is to balance the chassis and spread the weight across the chassis to give you, especially if you're racing and things like that. So there's no real difference apart from these are in hard cases. Now, moving up from that, we have this is a shorty pack. This is brand new. I got this 2 days ago. This is to go in my vintage Schumacher Top Cat. Luckily, the old vintage car's got a bit of LiPo love, and you can get a few. There's 3 or 4 that I've seen that actually come more shaped like what you're used to, and that's what I've got here. I've got a couple of these, and this is what I run in all my vintage cars that have limited design space for the battery. Now, they're close, they're not perfect, it is a little bit longer, so it can be a bit tight, but all in all, it's as close as you're going to get. Now, I can get these in nearly all my cars. I can't think off the top of my head one that doesn't fit. Now, this is a 4000 milliamp, 7.4 volts, so it's a perfect swap just for that. Now, LiPos have a working window that you need to keep the battery in, and that's where the chargers come in, and that's why TomTop was kind enough to send me one of these. Now, I've been charging LiPos for a while using some sort of basic entry chargers and things like that, and I've been using this style of charger, and for all purposes, they're actually okay. The main problem with these is you can only charge one at a time, and you've got all this cabling to deal with as well. So if you've got 2 of these because you're trying to charge some batteries, it can get a bit messy. So that's why I decided, is it worth looking at the next step up from these entry-level chargers? And that's why I've got this one in. So the things you have to do with LiPo batteries, you have to try and keep them in a window that they're happy with, because you only charge them to maximum before you're going to use them. So if you're going to go out running, you charge it that morning, you put it in the car, and then you go out. What you don't do is charge it to maximum, stick it in your bag and leave it there for 2 weeks, because you will damage the actual batteries. The battery itself likes to sit when it's resting at about 50 to 60%. That's the storage charge. Now, if you're going to put one of these in your bag and you're not going to use it for a few months, you want to store it at its storage charge. And chargers have that capability that you can actually set them to go to storage charge, and then they will go to that voltage, and then you can take them and store them just like normal. When you're driving, you don't want the battery to get too low, because you don't want to run down into its minimum. 15% is where you want to stop, 10% is you're going too low on these batteries. So how do you do that when you're driving? Well, there's 2 ways you can do that. One, it depends on your electronic speed controller. Now, a lot of you will probably have TBLE2 speed controllers, and you've probably got them set to run in brushed or brushless. Now, these will run 2S LiPos, but the problem is they don't communicate with the LiPo batteries. So this electronic speed controller that you all know well will happily run this battery right down to nothing, and then eventually it gets too low and you can damage it. So if you're running these and you want to run LiPos, you have 2 choices. One, you can buy a LiPo, where is mine? LiPo battery reader and alarm. This is mainly for telling me how full this battery is, but you can get little tiny alarms. Unfortunately, I don't have one. I do use them now and again, but mainly I've changed over to different electronic speed controllers. And what happens is that sits on this while it's using this electronic speed controller. When it gets too low, it will set an alarm off, and that tells you by an audible alarm that you've got to stop. Now, I'm not a big fan of those, really. I did use them personally, but they're not very waterproof and things like that. And also, if they fail, you're driving along, you don't know. Your best bet is to pick up an electronic speed controller that works properly with LiPo batteries, and that has a cutoff that basically once you're using the LiPo, once it gets too low, the car goes really slow and you know that you've basically got to the bottom of its charge. That's the easiest way to work with it, and you can set the voltage in this as well to the what cutoff it is to protect the battery. And then once you've done that, you can just forget about it, drive the car. Once it starts going slow, you know you're at the end. So let's talk about storage for LiPo batteries, and that's one of the big areas that a lot of people don't really understand and don't really get it. And there's lots of bits and pieces on the YouTube and stuff like that of people setting these LiPo batteries off and then seeing how dangerous they are and things like that. Now we have to remember that there is the perfect solution, and then there's what we have to work with. A classic example is that if you have a garage, if you have an outbuilding that's heated. Now these are all great things to do. Why? Because if you can put them in a garage, or you can put them in an outbuilding that's has a warmer temperature, then that means from a safety point of view, if there is an issue, it's not going to burn your house down. But obviously not all of us have that. Now I personally have a shed, but the shed is not heated. So the other side of it is, yes, I could put my LiPo batteries in my shed, but in the UK, it can get down below freezing, which again is not good for batteries either. So, you know, you've got to be realistic. So I keep my batteries in my house, in the studio, but there's a few things that I personally do that try and cover as many of the safety aspects as I can. But obviously there's another side of that, and that is cost. How much does it cost to store your LiPo batteries? Now there's a few different ways you can do it. There's dedicated LiPo battery storage devices, but they can be really expensive. So the way that I personally do it is I use one of these. It's a very low cost solution, and that is an ammunition box. Now I've actually got another one coming because I now have enough LiPo batteries that I need to spread them out into different units. So I have a brand new one of these coming, and these you can pick up for like £15 or something like that. But these alone are not the perfect solution. They're a compromise between price, safety, and accessibility and things like that. These ammo boxes were never designed for LiPo batteries. They were designed for ammunition. So yes, they're nice and strong and they're tough and things like that, but there is some limitations to using these. And one of them is that when a LiPo battery fails, it produces a lot of gas. So I've drilled some holes in the top of this. Also, what is recommended if you go down this route is you take out the rubber gasket on the inside. I haven't taken mine out. I tried to remove it, but I struggled to remove it on this one. But you should take this gasket out. Why? Well, the idea is that if there's a runaway battery, you get a lot of gas and smoke coming out, but it manages to get escape from the box. What you want to do is keep fire inside. That's the main one. So I've drilled a few holes in the top to help, and I will try and get this out again, this gasket, if I can, but it's actually really difficult on this particular one. I think this is a used one, an old one, whereas I think you can pick up newer ones that are brand new that I think you'll find it'd be easier to remove the gasket. Now that's not what I do. I don't just take the LiPo batteries and throw them in an ammo case. Personally, what I use is I use these. And these are LiPo bags. Now a lot of people have seen these online. Take this out. And the idea is that this is a fire retardant bag that you can take your battery and store your battery in and then do it up, and now that's fixed everything. No. Don't just buy one of those and go brilliant and then I'll leave it there. These help, but they are by no means a perfect solution. So what I do is I personally have one for each battery. Now the reason I do that is if you have one that fails and it's surrounded by all the other batteries, you could have a chain reaction where the damaged battery sets off your other batteries. And that's probably your worst scenario, because if you're storing all these batteries, you add up all the energy, even at 50 or 60% storage charge, that becomes a lot of power. And you don't want to run away. One battery ignites the other battery and ignites the other one. Now, from what I've seen online, it doesn't seem to happen it's not a guaranteed thing that's going to happen. I've seen people testing ammo boxes and other stuff like that, and they put other batteries in. They don't tend to run away, so if this one fails, it won't make this one catch on fire, but I don't want that risk. So what I do, and these are very cheap, and don't pick up the dirt cheapest ones you can find. Try and get ones that are actually branded if you can, because they're built a little bit better, but there's no real standard, if you will, so just be a bit mindful. So that's why I do extra layers. So I put each one in their own battery, but then I store them in a bigger bag. So what I do is I take my battery, and where the end is, I'll put it at that end, and then where the end is, I'll put it on the other end. Now I can get 3 batteries in each one of these. So I now have 3 in one, you see, like that. Then what I do is I will zip it up like that. Then I take my ammunition box, and then I take it and then I place it in there, and then I'll push it to the bottom like so. One thing you have to be careful of is if there's a fire, this box gets very hot. Now it might contain the flames, but it can put out a lot of heat around the metal, especially on the bottom. So what you don't do is you don't store this on the carpet, on the floor, on any wood or anything like that. So what I do to try and combat that side of it is I use 2 of these. These are car stands, and then I take a LiPo bag and I put that down on top, and then my ammunition bag sits like that. And that's how I store it. Now when it comes to charging a LiPo, you need a LiPo charger. I'm going to use the Ultra Power UP6 from Tomtops. Now to charge a LiPo, you need to know a few things. What S rating it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what voltage it's putting out, and its storage capacity. Now we know our battery stats, we can set the charger up to match. Now you can select what type of battery it is. This is obviously a LiPo, so we're going to select a LiPo. Then you have to select the cells. This is a 3S battery, but as you can see, you can charge up to 6S. So we select 3S. Now the mode, be it discharge, charge, external discharge or storage charge. We want to charge the battery. Now the current, I tend to charge at 1C, which is basically what the battery capacity is. So that's 4,500 or 4.5 volts. So I select 4.5 volts. The TVC is how much voltage per cell. I like to be very gentle on my batteries, so I keep it down to 4.19 volts or lower. And that's a basic overview of how you charge LiPos using the Ultra Power UP6. Now the UP6, from a quality point of view, I'm very happy with it. It feels solid, it's a nice size, and the GUI is very easy to use. And I do like that you can charge 2 batteries at once, and you control them with 2 different wheels to keep them separate. That is really good. Another thing that I really like about the charger is you can charge your iPhone with conductive charging on the top. I like that. That's a really nice little feature. As well as if you're out in the field and you've got a battery that's 9 to 32 volts DC, you can also charge other batteries from it. So if you've got a really big battery and you're out doing racing and stuff like that, you can do it that way, which I really like. One thing I'm not too keen on is one thing that I think they missed a trick on is you cannot balance charge with this charger. I'm really surprised at that. What's balance charging, I hear you ask? Well, depending how many cells you've got, as the charger is charging it, it's checking to make sure that all the cells are at the same voltage. This improves the life of the battery, as well as it keep it very uniform, because you don't want one cell dropping away or being too high voltage versus the others. Now that's quite important if you want to look after your batteries. Now you can just use the normal charger, but every now and again you need to balance charge. Where if this is your only charger, you can't do that. So for that reason, I would say it's better to skip the UP6 and go for the UP6 Plus. Spend a little bit more, and that way you'll be able to really look after your batteries. As well as the UP6 Plus is a little bit more powerful, but being that we're running mainly 2S LiPos, this is more than enough from that point of view. So it's purely from a longevity of your batteries, I would actually go up to the 6 Plus. Anyway, thanks very much. Please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, head over to the Patreon RC Kicks page, as without their help, this wouldn't be possible. And a massive thanks to Tom Top for supporting today's video. See you soon. Bye-bye. Check out one of these videos for some more RC fun.